Dabar, ponai ir ponios, nuo mūsų šiaurinių kaimynų judėkime šiek tiek labiau į pietus, į Latviją. Ir norėčiau pakviesti buvusį Latvijos gynybos ir užsienio reikalų ministrą, daktarą Artisą Pabriksą, pakalbėti apie Latvijos gynybos aspektą Baltijos regione. So please welcome Dr. Artis Pabriks.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to Vilnius. It's always nice to be in Lithuania. First of all, about form in which I will try to present a few of my ideas and experiences, and then about the content. Looking from the form, I cannot promise I will be very politically correct. I usually fail to be like that. But I also promise that I will try to tell what is on my mind in this case, and I hope that it will be useful. If it's not, then I learned in the previous sessions that you can blame my age because I'm over 38, so I guess that's not possible then very much to give any more to society as a politician. But I'm still acting, even if I'm now in the European Parliament, as I'm sometimes joking in paid exile together with Gabrielius Landsbergis. We are sitting next to each other, so I take care of him a little bit. I will try to maybe give you a little bit a broader scale, because I think it's important to see our security and I would say foreign policy challenges and threats, not only from the Baltic perspective, but also from the European perspective, because they are very much intertwined with each other. Yes, of course, very much depends on us. And most of the things depend on us, because at the end, we will be the last ones who would have to really take care of our security, our lives, our families, our country. But at the same time, we should be very much aware what are those international circumstances. And if we are looking to international circumstances, then I would say that European Union, NATO, and European continent is not in its best shape, mildly speaking. What are the major threats? We know that for the last half year at least, we are very much discussing so-called crisis of migration. I basically deny to speak about the crisis of migration, because it is not the crisis of migration, it is crisis of foreign and security policy. And migration is only the tip of the iceberg, and if we want to solve the issues of migration in Europe, then by those means which are at this moment suggested, then it is the same like to go to dentist to fix your cavity, and dentist, he or she, whoever, is suggesting you a painkiller. You cannot fix these by painkillers. So if we are suggesting, or European Union is suggesting now a common migration policy, common asylum policy, common binding quotas, this is not the solution. This is just a painkiller for a moment, unfortunately. Secondly, I would say that as far as the security and foreign policy challenges and threats, in previous panel, Estonia was very much praised. And I think it's in many ways correct. But at the same time, I think we in the Baltics, we are in fact not so bad. I'm not running for elections, so I don't need to kind of put higher speed on telling how good we are. But just to remind you, what kind of 3 NATO excellence centers do we have in the Baltic states? So we have in Estonia the NATO Excellence Center for cybersecurity. Is that one of the major threats in the world today? It is. In Lithuania, another excellence center is about energy, correct? Is energy one of the biggest issues, which is of all concerns? It is. And in Latvia, when I was defense minister, we established a third NATO Excellence Center, which is Excellence Center for Strategic Communication. So I think that 3 Baltic countries actually have been not only the litmus test, but we have been seeing those big challenges which have been coming to global perspective, to Western world, to European Union, I would say quite clearly. Unfortunately, we have been correct. for what we have been telling also to our colleagues, either in European Union and NATO, unfortunately. Because this is where I also agree with previous speakers. We have to hope for the best, but we always have to prepare for the worst. And then we will be much more on the safe side. If we are looking to current challenges, we of course can divide the traditional military threats, but we in the Baltics, we can be heard much more than many other European countries or regions if European Union or NATO is failing or becoming weaker. At the same time, if you are comparing, for instance, European Union, simply economically or also militarily, with such country which is a potential threat to our region and to many other countries at this moment, like Russia, we can see that Russian potential capacity, economic capacity, is much smaller. European Union is more than 20% of global economy, while Russia is, what, around 3%. So, if the difference is so big, there are two possibilities on the Russian side. One possibility is to become a great economic power in the world, more than 20%, like United States. Good luck. I don't think it will happen. Even if it would be good, because to have a wealthy neighbor, which hopefully could be maybe one day, maybe democratic, would be also fine. But let's not live in illusions. The second is, you have to decrease the opponent's force. Those 20% divide on 28 and even more, and then you can easily rule, because then the opponent is much weaker. This is what is happening. So in this case, European Union influence is actually much weaker than it could be, and for us, it is a particular threat because in any kind of hypothetical conflict, real conflict, military, economic, or let's suppose first of all military, if something happens in European continent, then in Berlin, Paris, London, Lisbon, the challenge will be maybe less or more jobless people, maybe some smaller increase in GDP or something in this direction. For Baltic countries, in turn, this is an existential threat. It's not about money. It's not about something else. It's existential. So from that perspective, we are hurt much more. If Union, empire, compare with whatever you want, it's not a question about political correctness, is failing or becoming weaker, always the regions which are more aside from the center will be failing first. So this is what we have to avoid. And from that perspective, I would claim that it's equally important that we are devoting our attention not only to strengthen our national defense and security capacity. This is clear. We have to do this. And we have to do it as much as together we can among all three countries. But at the same time, we have to keep our profile and our influence in those organizations which are important for our security, which mean NATO and European Union. And European Union at this moment is really in a very difficult stand. If I'm looking, for instance, to my own institution where I am now represented, European Parliament, imagine from 751 parliamentarians from 28 countries, almost 25% of elected members are against the European Union. They don't want this union to exist. Then we have one of the big countries, like Great Britain, now struggling with itself and its own identity and figuring out, do they want to stay in European Union or not? Imagine if Great Britain is leaving European Union, will European Union become stronger because of this? No, it will become weaker. And Britain will become weaker too. I hope they will understand this when they will come to referendum. Then we have also different, whatever, national separatist or irredentist movements, which is in Scotland, which is also in Catalonia, and I'm not taking sides here, but I'm looking to Great Britain. I was actually also recording one of the blogs when Scots went to polls to vote. Doesn't matter what will happen in Britain, but if Scotland would leave Great Britain would cease to be a good security ally for Baltic states for the next 3 years afterwards. It simply would be very difficult to sustain the same military cooperation that we had at this moment. So that would be one of the consequences in this case. About migration, you know, now politicians are competing with each other, and not only politicians. How many possible terrorists or how much terrorist threat poses us this migration wave in European continent? You know, I think it's not correct discussion in a sense, because it's clear that refugees and migrants are not terrorists. It's very clear. But at the same time, it's equally clear that among those hundreds of thousands of people will be also dangerous people. And from that perspective, I was very curiously taking also those leading European politicians who at the end of summer told, look, we are opening borders, we are letting these people cross the borders. Fine, we must have open hearts, we must have warm hearts, but who told us to leave brains behind? Nobody. And from that perspective, I think it's curious that once I am entering plane here now and flying to Brussels or somewhere else, I have to show my passport. But when the people are crossing the border, nobody can identify who they are. Just last week, BBC was interviewing one of the Syrian refugees who told himself, look, guys, you are not taking seriously security. I see that among those so-called refugees are many people who claim they're Syrians, they're not Syrians. So we have been delaying this thing. We have been delaying this control, and this is why this is not a migration crisis, but this is foreign policy and security crisis. So it's very nice to have this welcoming approach, but what we have been doing 4 years ago, when Syrians and others have been running away to Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey. Did we help Turkey? Did we help Jordan? Did we help Lebanon? Yes, of course, some administrators can tell me, yes, we gave some 4.5 billion, you know, in general to these countries. But 3 years ago, I never heard in European Commission or among European Union countries, you know, let's take a few 100,000 people away from our NATO allies country, Turkish camps. Let's take some of these 100,000 refugees. Nobody spoke about this. Secondly, nobody has been really trying to tackle the core, the cause of migration. And if you look to migration as a threat to European Union for, let's say, this unconventional terrorist threat, we would have two waves, and we know two waves. And while I'm speaking, you know, we have a next terrorist crisis in Mali, in one of the hotels in Bamako. There are two directions. One direction is Africa, and it's very clear, because Africa is a continent with the most growing demography. Africa is the most poor continent, next to the rich Europe. It's very clear that this migration wave will persist. And secondly, we have the second cause, which are wars and terrorists in the Middle East, in the countries like Iraq, like in Syria, like in Afghanistan. And if we, with today's information, can assume that invasion in Iraq under the Bush was maybe not exactly the right thing what was done, then I equally can say that there was a second mistake committed, the very quick withdrawal without thinking what will happen afterwards. So actually we committed two mistakes in Iraq. First, we invaded in the wrong time, and secondly, we left in the wrong time. So this is what is one of the causes. And then, what is the lesson? I think the lesson is, and this lesson is universal sentence, you can put it for Europeans, you can put it for Americans, and you can put it for ourselves at home. Sometimes passivity, or the cost of passivity in our politics, in our lives, is higher than the cost of activity. We have been passive for 4 years, and now we are paying price, and we are paying price through the prism also of Russian involvement in Syria. Because, you know, last summer or this summer behind, I was among those 89 European politicians who was included in the blacklist. So, sorry, by Russia. So, sorry, I've missed my usual holiday in Siberia, which I was usually taking every summer. Baltic coast is so boring. But at the same time, I must say that sometimes I admire Putin, because he's playing us like a children. He's all the time 2 steps in front of us. And either we don't want to understand what he's telling, or we don't really want to do anything with it. And in Syria, I think in Syria this game is very great, because with involvement in Syria, at least tactically, strategically, it's a different case. But tactically, he got back on the international scene. Everybody wants to cooperate with Russia to crush terrorists. And at the same time, for us in the West, it's very difficult to keep so-called high moral grounds once we are speaking, for instance, about Assad leaving today. Dear friends, I'm not supporter of Assad. We all know that he's very bloody dictator. But within these 4 years of civil war in Syria, can anybody from serious analysts name somebody from so-called moderate Islamist opposition, any name of a leader with whom to talk? Who can take the position? So after the Russian involvement, it's very clear, and unfortunately Lavrov has stated also today, it's very clear that Assad is going to stay until there will be this support. Because the position what West was holding was unsustainable position which we could not defend. So from that perspective, I think that what we in the Baltics are now, or we should be aware of, is that of course everybody will tell that Ukraine and Syria, these are two different cases. You know, they are not interconnected. We will cooperate with Russians in Syria because nobody else has been doing there anything, but Russians can do this. So their duty, on the other hand, is to show that we are involving in foreign affairs just like the West, just doing it more efficiently. We are better. This is a message at home. And this is why simple, ordinary people in Russia is applauding actually to this involvement until the propaganda machine is working. But I think Liz will tell more about propaganda machine. Hopefully once we'll visit also a strategic communication center in Riga. Might be useful for both sides. And it will be very difficult for our friends and colleagues in European Union after the Syrian crisis common work to say to Russians no after a while. Because Russians will tell, look, you're such a good friends. We have been solving this horrible terrorist crisis in Syria. Now, would you kind of be so kind and give a few steps forward on our needs? Who will say no? Who will look into the eyes of Sergei Lavrov or Vladimir Putin and say, no, you know, these are two separate cases, don't talk to us. So it'll be very difficult to do this. Practically, it's difficult to do this. So we must be very aware of this. I think the major sentence what I wanted to mention, I will finish now because I hope maybe there will be some question, because I did not want very much to reflect on the Latvian situation, but if you want, I can do this as well. We just celebrated our National Day on 18th of November, and I must say that, of course, latest 2 years, invasion in Ukraine and all these waves of disturbances, they very much improved the level of patriotism in my country. So also, just like in Estonia, many people are joining our National Guards. I know from my friends who are in National Guards, they have exercises almost every second weekend. The good thing is that they have money also for that. So our budget is increasing. If a few years ago, when we have been together with Jak, you know, we have been struggling together with Ruta, Rasa, my Lithuanian counterpart, about our budget. Now budget is rising. If we had last year 1%, next year it's planned 1.4, so the increase is dramatic. So we are now, if we can hold up with this speed, it's either 2018 or 2020 where we will reach 2%. The new technologies are appearing, the new weapons are appearing, so it's not so bad. But of course, if we would be smart, we could do it a few years before. So unfortunately, there have been also politicians in my country which have been either involved in lucrative businesses or they have been thinking for the better. Better to think always about the worst, and then we'll be on the right track. But it's important that we keep together and don't forget that we need this common influence in European and NATO institutions, because this is where a lot of conviction will go. We don't need to convince maybe ourselves, but we have to convince our colleagues across the ocean and also here in Europe what kind of dangers are in the modern world. And terrorism will not disappear. Luckily, we were not hit like Paris or some other places, but it can happen today or tomorrow, unfortunately. It can be Vilnius, can be Riga, can be Tallinn, any place. We have to be ready for this. And nobody can guarantee 100% security against such threats. Nobody. So, thank you very much. If there is any comment or question, I'm ready to take it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any questions from the audience to our Latvian guest? Yes, please.
Audrus Kaistys, Lithuanian Rifleman Union. I would like to ask a question about keeping firearms at home by Zemesardze or other organizations in Latvia. Are there any discussions about this in the society or conferences like this? Thank you.
Very good question. Yes, of course. It was very heated discussion because in the 90s we had firearms at home. Then, before joining NATO, it was a different planning. We gave up it mainly, so it was put in some special places, these weapons. At this moment, basically, we are more and more returning to the position where more and more weapons will be at home. There is a possibility to keep at home. Of course, there will be a special preconditions to guarantee a safety, etc. But I would say that also situation now is different than in 90s because we know each other, we know the members of National Guards much better than in early 90s when a lot of people were joining and there were no clear position. So it's more and more in this direction. It's not at this moment for everybody, but the numbers are going in that direction.
Any more questions? Yes, please. Just wait a second for a microphone.
I have this question. Is Latvia considering re-establishment of conscription system in the armed forces?
No, not at this moment. Because, honestly speaking, I'm personally not supportive of this thing at this moment as well. Why? There are a number of reasons, and I know that here we disagree with my Estonian colleagues, but we took a different pattern. Now, if you are looking to the Latvian defense system, it is based on planned approximately 6, maybe a little bit more professional, 6 or a little bit more thousand professional soldiers, and between 10 to 12,000 National Guards. Now, this is a unit which is highly patriotical, which is well equipped, and which should be well trained. That also would mean that we can gather these people in a very short period of time. So altogether that would be about 18,000 or so, maybe even a little bit more. If we take into account also reserve, and we are thinking about reserves, those people which have been in the professional army and retired, so few thousand additionally. If we would now change the horses, first of all, what is negative? I would say we did not implement fully, or we don't know the full capacity of existing system because we were underfunded, not enough money. So before we change the horses, let's go to the end, with a concrete proposal. Secondly, to introduce general conscription. It would not give, in our understanding, such an efficiency. It will not apply to everybody, and it will be even more expensive at this moment. So I think that in the nearest 5 years, there are no such plans for practical reasons, financial reasons, and also possibility to effectively deliver the defense. Because if we would have a really serious problem, let's say war with Russia, we would not have 3 days where to get these people under arms. And I still don't believe very much that we can get, let's say, 50,000 in 2 or 3 days. It will be quite difficult, in current circumstances, because we know how an opponent is becoming much better. If you are looking how, for instance, Russian military training system have been developing, the very good experience in Ukrainian war, very good experience with Syria war. They are well trained. They are making wars now. So we must understand how they will work on this. I don't think in our case that would help if we would change now systems.
Yes, please.
Emilia Ponziute, student at Sciences Po. I'm wondering how cohesive is Latvian society. The speakers before talked about resilience, and there is a number of Russian speakers in Latvia. I'm wondering if they're all standing behind the Latvian patriotic idea.
Well, probably they are not all standing behind. Let's be honest. I would say that statistically, probably there are more personal feelings among the ethnic Latvians than non-ethnic Latvians. And I think it's very much also in connection with communication, with media, and with general beliefs. And allow me to say a small joke. Canadian, which is truth, Canadian visiting Moscow, sitting in a taxi, and taxi driver is complaining, about how terrible it is to live in Russia and all these bad things, and he wants to emigrate. And he tells, I want to emigrate to United States. And then Canadian is asking, why United States? Canada is closer to Europe, it's very democratic, it's free, multicultural, etc. Taxi driver tells, I don't care. I need the great country. So for some of these people, it's very difficult to get integrated in a country of 2 million, because we cannot offer such kind of greatness. No nuclear bombs, no such big submarines. It's simply a small culture with maybe a better economy, with maybe better weather, whatever, European Union, but it doesn't work like this. And but the other thing is, of course, Ukrainian war has split the Russian ethnic community in Latvia also. That has split. Secondly, I really believe that majority, and the very huge majority of ethnic Russians who live in Latvia, they would not like to go against the state. They would not be maybe happy about some things, and they like Russians and Russia, and they like Putin. But I don't think they would really be willing to take arms. On the other hand, if you are looking to the Latvian side or ethnic Latvian side, I could say just we have the same opinion like in our neighboring country in Estonia, and I believe also in Lithuania. If there will be a green man in Latvia, we will shoot them. Very simple. We will not take chances like in Ukraine. We will simply eliminate them. And we have to do this. And if somebody is not doing this, then this politician probably should go somewhere behind the better windows.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pabriks. Thank you very much. Also a token of appreciation from Lithuanian Rifleman Union. Thank you very much.